Hey, what's up, and happy Thanksgiving. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. I am recording this video late Saturday night, and I apologize it's come out pretty late due to the holiday season. I hope everybody has had a happy Thanksgiving, has enjoyed any time off if they had it, friends, family, the turkey, all the good stuff. But of course, I do owe you guys this video. I do owe you my thoughts. NFL Week 13, DFS, that's DraftKings, that's FanDuel, the best plays, the core plays. So stick around if you're looking for the good stuff. That are players that you need to be building your lineups around for Week 13 NFL. This video will be abbreviated. We're going to blow through it, but we're going to cover the vital, the essential guys that you should be building your lineups around tomorrow, Sunday, main slate, DFS. Stick around for all that and more. Hey guys, and welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Thank you for taking the time, of course, to find this channel, to click on this video. I promise you one thing, and that's where we're going to quickly cover the best plays, core plays, guys that you should be fitting into your lineups in DFS, DraftKings, and FanDuel specifically. Those guys, those players that are going to help you win in DFS tomorrow in the main slates. Of course, we're entering Week 13 in the NFL season. It's a little bit of a shortened slate given the fact that we had Thursday, Thanksgiving, a number of games played that day, and we have, of course, our primetime slates later on. So a little bit of a shortened slate, but nonetheless still some great plays, some good players that are in good spots. A couple of things I wanted to mention, though, before we really get into it. First, I mentioned, of course, with the holiday season, we're talking about a shortened week, a shortened slate in main slate DFS. The other thing, too, because of Thanksgiving and just, family time, turkey, all the good stuff, I did not get to publish a weekly matchup video, but those spreadsheets that typically accompany that video that are linked in the description have still been made. I link them down below, so go ahead, find those spreadsheets down below. That's full defense versus position spreadsheets updated through Week 13. They're linked down below in this video. Click on them, find them useful, and go ahead and attack this slate. And finally here, I mentioned it already, happy Thanksgiving to all you guys. Thank you for, of course, finding this video, taking the time to click on the video, stick with me here. If you've joined me in the past, thanks for returning. If you're new here, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's the easiest way to support this channel, support No Huddle Fantasy Sports. And of course, if you guys have any insight, any players, any core players that I may have missed, anyone that you're building lineups around, go ahead, leave a comment down below. Let us know why you're playing that player, why you might not like some of the guys I've mentioned. It all helps. It's a community here, building off one another, throwing information back and forth. That's how we build better lineups than other guys, other communities out there. So go ahead, like I said, leave a comment down below. And so really to jump into Week 13, we're going to start off with the quarterback position as always. Two guys I'm going to mention here. One of them's an obvious play. He doesn't need much of an introduction or really any description as to why you should play him, but Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City, looking like he's 7,400 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. He is a home big favorite this week versus Oakland. You're looking at a pretty high total, though, 50.5 over under with a 11-point spread in favor, of course, of the home team Kansas City Chiefs. It's usually not a combination I like to play or look forward to in DFS. Home favorite quarterbacks, big home favorite quarterbacks, but Patrick Mahomes is who he is. He's a different type of beast. He's a different type of quarterback. He's someone that's safe if you're playing cash games, but I think he has upside both in tournaments and in cash. I like him this week just simply based upon his name. He doesn't need much of an explanation. He played Oakland earlier this season and absolutely destroyed them in Oakland, so Oakland is a favorable matchup, but we have history here. He plays them twice a year. Earlier this season, I think he threw 4 touchdowns against them, and all 4 of those came in like the third quarter or in one quarter of the game. So absolutely has had his way with Oakland. In last week, so he's come off obviously an injury here. Over the last couple of weeks, he's gotten better since he's come back from injury. Last week, he showcased he had the ability to run the ball, which really, in my mind, shows that he's coming healthy off of that injury right now. He had 50-plus rushing yards last week, which if he can do that, that's even more upside for Patrick Mahomes. But again, he has a solid matchup versus a very weak Oakland defense, especially against the pass. Oakland giving up 260 passing yards a game, 20 to 21 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, depending on FanDuel or DraftKings. And then the last thing I want to mention here is, does he have a chip on his shoulder? Patrick Mahomes has kind of slid under the radar as of late due to injury, not playing at the level he had played last year, which is very hard to repeat. But nonetheless, I think there's a lot of attention being driven away from Kansas City, being driven away from Patrick Mahomes. Everybody's talking about Lamar Jackson now, the Ravens, So I think Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They're looking to prove something here. I think they can do that this week at home easily against Oakland. I really like him. I also want to mention they don't have much of a running game in Kansas City right now. It's Williams and McCoy. They get hurt back and forth, but everything is through the air. He's got Tyreek Hill back. I like Patrick Mahomes as a safe play, cash games, or GPP with some upside. The second guy I want to recommend as a core play for at least me here is Nick Foles for Jacksonville. He's a home dog this week, playing against Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers, one of the easiest teams to attack through the air. So, of course, that's one reason I love him. The game is a 47 over-under, so not an elite over-under, but still one that allows for a lot of fantasy points to be had. And like I mentioned, he's an underdog at +3, so this game should remain close, could turn into a shootout. I think it very likely could. He's 5,700 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel, so a very favorable price tag on both sites for him. But do keep in mind he's likely going to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks on the slate. So if you're looking to play a contrarian play, he might not be the guy. Nonetheless, he's a guy I'm looking to play this week. And he's come, again, another guy like Patrick Mahomes coming off an injury. He was injured for most of the season, has played the last 2 weeks, had a really good game. Actually, both games have been decent, but in each game, the big thing here is he's getting a ton of volume. They just completely went airborne with him coming back under center. I think he's had 95 attempts over the last 2 weeks, so nearly 50 attempts a game. You got to like that, at especially his price tag. He's a value play, like I mentioned, on both sites. And finally here, Tampa Bay's defense, probably the number one reason you want to play him, even if he was more expensive. But Tampa Bay's defense is just absolutely garbage right now. They cannot stop the pass. They cannot stop quarterbacks. Each and every week, quarterbacks are just lighting them up. Tampa Bay right now giving up 285 passing yards through the air on average per game and giving up 22 to 23 fantasy points per game. I think that's second in the NFL right now, just behind the Arizona Cardinals. But I would argue Tampa Bay is the number one team to attack here. And so for all those delicious reasons, I love playing Nick Foles this week as one of my core plays. So with that said, who are we going to go with at running back this week? Well, I mentioned already, my strategy is going to be trying to pay up as much as possible at the running back position. He's really expensive. Again, another guy like Mahomes, you don't need much of an explanation. Just stoot him up if you can. Put him in your lineups if you can fit him. That's Christian McCaffrey for Carolina. 10,500 on DraftKings, 11,000 on FanDuel. So again, very, very, very expensive. I think the most expensive skill position player on the slate tomorrow. But he's in one of the best matchups he's had in weeks against Washington. Washington giving up 119 rushing yards a game, 24 fantasy points on FanDuel on average, which is half point PPR. That number jumps up to 28 fantasy points per game on DraftKings on a full PPR site. He's averaging like 27 plus touches a game, so he's getting a ton of touches. He still, believe it or not, is worth that price tag, even though it's so high. So if you can fit him in a great matchup versus Washington, I love Christian McCaffrey. Oh, and finally, before I forget, the last thing I want to add about him, not that anything else needs added, but Christian McCaffrey and Carolina playing at home versus Washington. Carolina is also a 10-point home favorite. Fits that mold of a home big favorite running back. Go with Christian McCaffrey tomorrow and don't worry about it. Next up here, I want to talk about Saquon Barkley. He is an elite running back. Maybe he's playing with a little bit of an injury, but he's 7,400 on DraftKings, 7,600 on FanDuel. A really good value on FanDuel. I love Saquon Barkley this week for the Giants. They are playing at home. They unfortunately are underdogs at home, but he's just priced too cheaply. He should be priced up there. I realize his performance hasn't been up there with the guys like Christian McCaffrey, but there's no reason he should be priced down as far as he has been, especially on FanDuel. But Green Bay, they're playing, like I said, at home versus Green Bay. Green Bay is known as a run funnel defense as of late. They can defend the pass, but they really struggle against the run. They're currently ranked within the top 5 in terms of a running back matchup, meaning a very, very favorable matchup for running backs, giving up over nearly 115 rushing yards per game and over 25 points in PPR sites. Love Saquon Barkley at those price tags. I think he can easily pay off, and he has that elite upside. We've seen him in the past. We've seen what he could do last year. I like Saquon Barkley for the Giants this week, especially on FanDuel. The only road running back I'm going to recommend this week is Le'Veon Bell for the Jets. He's 7,200 on DraftKings, 7,300 on FanDuel. Again, a little bit more of a value on FanDuel here, but he's right now I wouldn't say he's had a disappointing season. People may be saying that right now, but he's had a pretty solid season. He's pretty dependable. He just hasn't flashed that super elite upside that we've seen from him in the past. But if you focus on the last month, he's ranked top 5 in fantasy points and touches, which you'd like to see. He's getting fed the ball more since he's had a little bit of a discussion with Adam Gase, since they got Darnold back and they have a little bit better offense. But we're really looking at right now with Le'Veon Bell, I know he's a road running back, but they are playing Cincinnati. Cincinnati is an elite matchup for running backs this season. They're giving up a ridiculous amount of points and a ridiculous amount of yards on the ground. They're right now giving up nearly 120 rushing yards per game. And again, similar to Saquon Barkley's matchup, giving up 25 plus fantasy points in PPR. We all know what Le'Veon Bell can do, regardless of the outcome of the game, regardless if they're on the road. They are favorites on the road, but he still stays on the field. He's a 3-down back. He's excellent out of the backfield. He gets his touches, whether it's through the air or on the ground. So I like Le'Veon Bell this week as a safe option on both sites. The last running back I'm going to recommend here, a little bit of a stretch, but somebody I think you can find value in, and that's Benny Snell Jr. for Pittsburgh, playing at home versus Cleveland. They are, in terms of Pittsburgh, they are slight underdogs, but he is priced so low on DraftKings at $4,700. I think it's worth it. Cleveland has, for the most part, outside of some of these bad teams they've played lately, like Miami, they've really struggled against the run. They're one of the easiest ways to exploit their defense is on the ground. I think the Steelers will be focused on running the ball, considering they've literally been decimated across their entire offense. They're playing a third-string quarterback. They have no receivers. I think they're going to focus on the run game right now. And if you look at Benny Snell Jr., everybody's talking about Jalen Samuels. Benny Snell Jr. is their running back. Jalen Samuels is a tight end converted to running back. He's great out of the backfield. He's a great third-down back, but he is not a true running back. Benny Snell Jr. was just drafted, and he's filling that role. He played 49% of the offensive snaps last week in Week 12. He had 21 carries for 98 yards and a 4.7 yards per carry average. Post games, Mike Tomlin, the coaching staff, they praised him. They like what he did. So I think they stick with him. I think he's the guy that's going to get the majority of the carries. You might not see 21 carries, but you could see 15 to 20 carries out of this guy. He's going to be their red zone guy. He's really their only true running back. I like him against a Cleveland defense that can struggle against the run, especially at that price tag of $4,700 on DraftKings. Next up here, we're going to talk about the wide receiver position. I think this is a position where you can save some money, maybe not play complete values, cheap bottom of the barrel values, but you can play, I think that middle tier range of price tags helps you fit in more expensive backs, may help you fit in a Mahomes or in a more expensive quarterback, but these are guys you can see listed here that fall in that 7,000 or under range. First up guy I'm going to mention here is Davante Adams for Green Bay. He is that $7,000 DraftKings price guy. He's $8,000 on FanDuel, and in general, I think he is just too underpriced. He should be one of the top priced wide receivers, but he's not. He has been injured this season. He's a guy that got drafted in a lot of first rounds, tons of touchdown upside going into the season, but just again suffered, similar to Saquon Barkley, suffered that injury bug early, just hasn't been on the right page. But over the last couple of weeks, he's coming into his own again. I think his $7,000 price tag on DraftKings is just too low. I think he can easily pass that price tag up in terms of value. He gets a ton of targets, last 3 games especially, and one of these games, keep in mind, is pre-injury, but he had 35 targets and turned that into 21 receptions. So at $7,000, that is just super high upside. He gets a ton of red zone looks. He's their red zone target guy. Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. He's in a great matchup this week. Green Bay's playing in New York against the Giants. They're 6-point favorites. The New York Giants right now are giving up a ton of points to the wide receiver position. In fact, they're ranked number 2, 34 plus fantasy points PPR against wide receivers this season. Number 2 in the NFL. A very, very weak secondary, a secondary you can exploit with elite receivers, any receiver really. I think Davante Adams, his price tag, elite matchup on the road against the Giants, getting that volume. I think he can easily exceed that $7,000 price tag on DraftKings and that $8,000 price tag on FanDuel. He's my favorite receiver in terms of core plays. Next up here, we need a guy we can pair with our boy Nick Foles at that cheap price tag. You can go with DJ Chark for Jacksonville. It's an easy pairing here. He's clearly turned into Nick Foles, really Jacksonville's favorite wide receiver. He's now a wide receiver 1, but he's in an elite matchup. I already mentioned Nick Foles. That Tampa Bay secondary is so bad. They're number 1 in terms of fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position at over 39 PPR points per game to wide receivers. That's number 1 in the NFL. It's the best matchup you can get on paper for a wide receiver. DJ Chark's in that position. $6,600 on DraftKings, $6,900 on FanDuel. Great price tag. You pair him with Nick Foles, and you can almost afford anybody. I really love him. I talked about how he's turned into a true wide receiver one. He's had 22 targets over the last 2 games with Nick Foles, the 2 games that Nick Foles has started. So clearly his favorite target. I like DJ Chark easily with Nick Foles. Even without, you can go with him safely this week as a core play. Next up, even dropping a little bit lower in terms of price tag here, we're going with Tyler Boyd for Cincinnati. They are playing at home, but they are underdogs at home versus the New York Jets. Jets secondary pretty weak. I've been attacking them all year with wide receivers. But the big thing here, like I mentioned, a cheap price tag of $5,500 on DraftKings, $6,000 on FanDuel. And on top of that, he's getting a better quarterback. He's really dropped. He hasn't produced much this year in terms of Tyler Boyd in Cincinnati. But that's been with a backup quarterback. Cincinnati's offense has just been anemic. But the big thing here, like I mentioned, Andy Dalton's returning to their lineup at quarterback. With Andy Dalton, you see a huge usage boost for Tyler Boyd, really that entire offense. I believe, in fact, with Andy Dalton, Tyler Boyd may have been a top 15 overall fantasy point wide receiver scorer for the season. You can check that, but nonetheless, he was much better with him under center. And so with all that said, the price tag, Andy Dalton's return in that very, very weak elite matchup versus that Jets secondary, I love Tyler Boyd this week for Cincinnati. And finally here, the last guy I'm going to recommend, he's basically on the list every week, and that's Devontae Parker for Miami, $5,700 on DraftKings, $6,000 on FanDuel. So a nice low price tag, just like Tyler Boyd. I keep listing him week after week because his price really doesn't move, but I'm going to keep doing it as long as that price stays the same. He gets a ton of volume, a ton of targets. He's a big target favorite of Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's a better offense with Fitzpatrick under center. He's had 32 targets over his last 3 games, so over 10 targets a game on average over the last 3. And on top of all of that, he's got a great matchup. He plays the Philadelphia Eagles at home. I realize Miami is Miami, but that Eagles secondary is pretty bad. In fact, they're worse than the Jets. They're a top 5 matchup in terms of wide receiver on paper production, giving up 32 plus points PPR to wide receivers. So Devontae Parker for Miami, we've seen the volume. He has the opportunity. He's in a great matchup, and he's got a great price. Gotta love him this week again in DFS. And lastly, jump into the tight end position this week. I am literally paying at the bottom of the barrel for players this week. I got Jack Doyle for Indy, Tyler Higbee for the Los Angeles Rams. Apologize, I didn't get to change, I guess, Higbee's Rams color scheme there. He's not red, he should be a blue. But over to Jack Doyle, we got $3,300 on DraftKings, $5,000 on FanDuel. Really like the price on DraftKings there. Dirt cheap, like I mentioned. The big thing here, Eric Ebron landed on the injured reserve, so he'll be by himself basically at the tight end position. That means more opportunity. We always love opportunity, especially at those cheap price tags. You're going to see an increased snap count, increased usage. His targets should go up. I look back the last couple of weeks, we've had 28 targets combined thrown to the tight ends for Indianapolis. So Brisket clearly is aiming for tight ends, but they've split it between him and Ebron. So you're looking at 28 targets that could go his way. I'm sorry, not 28, but you're talking about 7 to 10 targets on average per game going to the tight end position. Those could go Jack Doyle's way this week. And at that price tag, especially if he gets into the end zone, he gets some red zone targets. You got to love that. Finally here, Tennessee's matchup is, I would say, a top half of the NFL matchup for tight ends. They're ranked number 11 in the NFL in terms of fantasy points given up to tight ends. So a good matchup here. And finally here, basically what we're going with Higbee, $2,500. I talked about how Doyle was dirt cheap. Well, Higbee's cheaper than dirt on DraftKings. His price goes up a little bit more on FanDuel. I don't really understand that. I guess they're being proactive. But again, he's the man this week based upon injury. Garrett Everett is rolled out with a knee. The big thing here, we're facing Arizona Cardinals. What do? We take the tight end that faces the Cardinals week in and week out. It's almost a surefire tight end. They give up a ton of points. They're actually ranked number 1 in the NFL in terms of points given up to tight ends, and that's by a long shot. They average over 1 touchdown given up per game to the tight end position. So you got to love that. Any tight end that faces the Cardinals is in play. Tyler Higbee at his cheap price tag for the Rams is in play. And if you want to actually look back to week 12, he's a guy that does get some usage. He had 7 targets, which was number 4 in the NFL in terms of tight end usage. So you got to like that. He's going to stay involved. And again, you're just going to attack Arizona with tight ends. I like Tyler Higbee at $2,500, especially on DraftKings. And so that, one way or another, quickly wraps up our Week 13 prep here. Our core plays, top plays, guys that you should be building lineups around. Guys, I'll be building my lineups around. But of course, we always have other considerations. Don't have a lot of guys I want to mention particularly here. But one guy I'll be looking at, Sam Darnold for the Jets. I think he's in a great spot. Another guy that's on the cheap. You compare with other receivers like Jamison Crowder for a cheaper stack, but I do like Sam Darnold as a quarterback this week for the Jets. I mentioned Phillip Lindsay here for Denver. He's again in a good matchup. But the thing is, I believe he's really taken over as a running back one role. It was split pretty evenly with Royce Freeman, but if you look back to the last couple of weeks, he's kind of getting that higher 60-70% usage. So I do like Phillip Lindsay at I think it's a $5,000 price tag on DraftKings, but a reasonable price. Should be a running back one role now going forward. Cooper Kupp, we saw him get back to that 10 target workload, 10 plus target workload last week. If he can stay and maintain that, he's going to go back to that super high end PPR type of receiver. I like Cooper Kupp this week. And finally here, Sterling Shepard. I think we already got news that Golden Tate is rolled out. When Tate is out, Sterling Shepard has turned into he's blossomed really into a really great fantasy receiver. So with Tate out, I do really like Sterling Shepard on the cheap at the wide receiver position. And so that really wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. I do really appreciate that. Of course, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That goes a long way in helping support me, support No Huddle Fantasy Sports. And leave me some comments down below if you recommend any guys, any core plays or stats or anything that I may have missed. And finally here, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys enjoyed your holiday season. I hope you got together with family, had all the turkey, fell asleep early, took a nap, all the good stuff that comes with my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. It's a very relaxing time with family, friends. And of course, good luck tomorrow in main slate DFS. Let's win some cash. I hope to see you guys atop the leaderboards. I'll check you in the next video.